it was at a conference of the California Wellness Foundation, a VPI annual conference, that I heard for the first time this quote, that young people don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. And that is what's most effective in helping turn a young person around. Because what I've learned is what young people need the most is a healthy relationship with a positive adult. And that is what makes anything else potent, right? There's actually research around psychotherapy and talk therapy that says it's not the therapy that works, it's the relationship with the therapist and the patient that works. So is the same in all of these other programs, drug treatment, mental health, even job training programs. It is the relationship, a healthy relationship with a positive adult, that can turn things around. So what makes great programs great is not necessarily the program design or the concept, but it is the people. It's the passion, the desire, the love of the people that serve the youth. So I want to talk about what I want to do in Alameda County briefly. I think I've taken up too much time already. And so I want to go to these 9 principles of reform. And so this is a snapshot of what we want to do to reform the criminal and juvenile justice system in Alameda County. What I've been talking about so far is number 1, a strengths-based approach. This is for both adult and juvenile. So Alameda County, we have 2,000 juveniles on probation, 15,000 adults on probation. We have a juvenile hall with 360 beds and a camp with 60 beds. That's the scope of our work, 620 staff, $92 million budget. So we want a strength-based approach. Hence, all of our juvenile probation officers are being trained in positive youth development. All of our adult probation officers will be trained in what we call motivational interviewing. But part of the challenge with some of these what's called evidence-based practices, motivational interviewing, even risk assessments, or the programs of multisystemic therapy and multidimensional treatment, foster care, and functional family therapies, and all these T's, is missing the cultural competency and the passion and love and desire that's needed to make them effective. Next is a risk-based supervision, needs-based services. Like I said, for low-risk folks, we want to not touch them because we've proven we do a great job of making them worse. We want to not touch them. And then the higher risk folks, based on sound risk assessment, not on quackery science, and we have so few staff with a huge group of folks, is we want to say who is most at risk of actual rates of violence. That's who we want to focus our intervention on. And then needs-based services. We want to say based upon your risk, this is what your supervision level is. Based upon your needs, this is what your services are going to be. And so, for instance, we use a tool that's considered evidence-based practice that we're scrapping because it merges risk and need. So literally, a 40-year-old homeless drug addict will have the same score as a 20-year-old gang member who has a bunch of gun offenses because one risks through his score up and one's needs through his score up. Our problem as a department is we would do the same thing with both, assign them to a task force member, so a PO who has a gun, and assign to a police officer. We never address the homelessness or drug addiction. And so we have to change both how we assess risk and what we do once we have that assessed risk. Part of the needs-based services is individual achievement plans. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this quickly. This is how I want to change the work of our probation officers, that they will be mandated to develop an individual achievement plan within the first 30 days of every person getting on their caseload. An individual achievement plan has 7 domains: family services, education, employment, drug treatment, mental health, connection, it's actually called healthy relationship with a positive adult, and then the catch-all other. And then the PO with tools must say, what are the top 3 needs amongst these 7 domains of this person on my caseload? And together with the person on the caseload, you will say, these are the 3 we're going to work on. We're going to each develop a goal in these 3 areas, and then the IAP is an actual contract. The document is a contract where the person on probation says, I agree to avail myself to these services and participate in the programs. The PO says, I agree to connect you to these services, not just hand you a piece of paper that's a referral, but really connect you to these services in a meaningful way. And the supervisor says, I will make sure I review this plan with both every 90 days, and all 3 sign. And that becomes, and then when the PO sees the person on probation, that's the discussion. Where are we at on our 3 things? How are you at in your GED class? What's going on with the job training program? And are you going to your drug treatment classes? That's the discussion. That you're supervising that when you're having your supervision with the folks on your caseload. And so that's the individual achievement plan. Next is this trauma-informed intervention. That there's an old saying that hurt people hurt people. And we have a lot of traumatized young people who come into our system. In fact, you could argue that the largest contributor to the delinquent behavior is the trauma that they've experienced. And so if all we see is the delinquent act, and we're trying to address the delinquent act, and we don't address the underlying trauma, we will be unsuccessful every time. And so we're looking at what is the trauma. And so one thing we actually did already is in our disposition reports, the reports that the probation officer turns into the court when the court is considering what the disposition is, juvenile terms for sentencing, is we say, yeah, this is what the findings, the convictions, if you will, and this is the background, but here's the trauma the young person has experienced. So the court has an understanding, yes, the young person did this, but the young person has also experienced that, so there can be some balance when the judge is making a decision. The second piece we have to do, and a little more difficult, is when that judge places that youth on probation, how are we going to address that trauma? I don't have the answer for you right now, but we are working on various things. One is just training for our probation officers to recognize and understand the trauma, while we also plug young people in to services, supports, and opportunities that can begin to address the trauma they've experienced instead of just focusing on this delinquent act. Evidence-based practices, as I mentioned, we want to expand our use of evidence-based practices, though we want to add a cultural competency piece that makes them ultimately effective. Strong community partnership and community-based services. This is one of those things of going from advocate to bureaucrat. But when I was at the mentoring center, I remember Alameda County got a grant to place a probation officer at Castlemont High School. And I remember thinking that was a bad thing, because I said my perspective of probation then was they're just going to find ways to violate all the youth at probation in Castlemont, and they're going to cause more incarceration. Now, even that program ended up being good, because it was a good PO who was selected for that, who's still at the department, who I've talked to, and I've talked to the old principal of Castlemont. So I actually want to put POs in schools. I used to be against it, but the right POs, right? We're not going to put the most pissed off probation officer who's disgruntled at the world. Right? We're going to put the passionate, caring probation officers, thankfully we have many, in the schools, not as another layer of security, but as someone that'll provide support services and opportunities to make sure that young people are staying in school and graduate from school. We opened up for the first time in Alameda County an evening reporting center. This is an alternative to detention, where we're saying to the court, young people who you would have otherwise locked up, if you can say that young person can go home, but every day after school they have to report to this evening reporting center, we want to, instead of them being locked up, let them go home while they're going to court, but they have to report to this evening reporting center. We opened up one a few weeks ago at Youth Uprising, this extraordinary youth facility that I know many of you all are aware of. And so we're also placing a probation officer there. So we'll have a probation officer there. The young people will be at Youth Uprising instead of Juvenile Hall. And we also just got a state grant to open 2 more up. And one more thing I'll say about that, because anybody else in the Bay Area, I actually want to recruit you. We're going to start in January something called the Reading and Homework Hour at Juvenile Hall. When I came to Juvenile Hall, the school told me we don't give homework out because our staff aren't there. Your staff says it's not my responsibility to help young people do homework, and you can't have pencils in the room. So I said, okay, this is an opportunity for both to develop the academics as well as to work on bringing the community into Juvenile Hall, which we actually have a number of community organizations already coming in, but we want to bring just the average community member. And so I've been going to churches and civic organizations everywhere, generally I'm speaking, recruiting for people to volunteer. We're up to over 100 signed up volunteers. We want to get to actually over 1,000, because what we want to do is every single day for an hour is invite community members in, who pass a background and get some training, community members in to help with homework and reading in Juvenile Hall. My grandiose goal today, there are 206 youth in Juvenile Hall, Alameda County. I would love for 206 adults to come in and spend one-on-one time for an hour with those young people reading and doing their homework. Graduated sanctions, and this is a twofold thing. This is Yes, we want to make sure that young people have consequences for their negative behavior, but this also is, right now, there's no policies and procedures around this. And so my colleague here in San Francisco, the juvenile chief probation officer, always quote him on this. He said, a lot of young people get arrested for poo-poo, pissed off probation officers. And when you don't have guidelines and you don't have policies and procedures on how and when and why you can violate someone's probation, then someone will do anything, right? So I had been here for, I think, a month, and I got a call from a passionate person at juvenile hall, said, this PO just brought this girl in. She was in the community. She came to a mandated program, but answered her cell phone in the middle of the group. The PO and her got into an argument. The PO choked her, arrested her, and brought her to juvenile hall on a violation. Right? Because the absence of policies and protocols and procedures to say when and how and what, that was allowed to happen. Now, once I got that call, we turned around and the girl was released and the PO disciplined. But that's why we want to have a grid. And in fact, the person doing this is in the house. James Bell is doing this for, and Hayward Burns Institute is developing this for Alameda County probation. And the last piece here is data-driven performance management. When I got to Alameda County, there wasn't a single person responsible for collecting data or research. That was rough. And many of y'all who work with us know how rough that is, trying to get data from us. And so thankfully to the Board of Supervisors who agree, we have a 7-member brand new research and data unit now. We actually brought people from Washington, D.C., from Napa, from Riverside, had a few people who were in-house that we brought into this unit, 7-person data research unit who will be doing a number of extraordinary things, you know, one, like actually collecting recidivism data. When I was in New York and I was emailing when I was coming to probation, I sent the email numerous, but one said, can you tell me what your recidivism rate is? Can you tell me what your revocation rate is? Can you tell me how many people on probation get rearrested for homicide or attempted homicide every year? And I had about 5 other questions. And the response I got to every one was, we don't know, we don't track it. And it wasn't because anyone was doing something wrong, it was because they just didn't have the capacity to do that, and we were able to move some things around and have the capacity to do that. One of the big things that we will eventually do here is replicate the police CompStat model and do a probation statistics, where every department head or division head will have certain measures. So in juvenile hall, it'll be school attendance, program participation by the youth, number of incidents, fights and restraints and room time, overtime, and other things that this data unit will collect those measures, and every month it will be presented to the superintendent of juvenile hall on why didn't you meet your measures, what are you going to do to meet them, or congratulations on meeting them, go ahead and do better. And that will be a monthly will be public to our staff. It'd be interesting actually making it public altogether, but we'll actually video cast that to our staff who want to see that, the head of juvenile hall, the head of our camp, the head of our juvenile probation officer, the head of our adult probation officers, having to answer to their statistics. And so, thank you. So that was not so quick, but a quick rundown of the 9 principles of reform. Some of the things not reflected here is in our Camp Sweeney, we're going to bring in the Missouri, the touted Missouri model to our camp so that we can have a rehabilitative model that has been proven effective. We're going to do some much better programming in our juvenile hall. And one of the things we're thinking about for a little bit of the long term is doing something that the Wayne County, which is Detroit, and there's good that can come out of Detroit, is they did an extraordinary, now they actually privatized. I don't know if I would win that union battle, so I'm not even going there. But what they did was say they wanted realignment. They took their youth back from the state, and then they hired lead entities, community-based organizations. They basically turned the community probation system over to the community. So there aren't any probation officers. The community has case managers, and what it is, I'm going to really simplify something that's not this simple, is they basically say, here's $125 a day per youth. That young person needs tutoring and some supervision, you're going to make a lot of money off of that. That young person needs deep mental health treatment, you're not going to make a lot of money off that, but it's not going to just be a wash, you're going to be able to make money and serve youth. If you think that young person needs to be locked up, the system says, we will lock them up and give us our $125 back. And so it's incentivizing keeping young people safe and local and treated, and their outcomes, I just saw their outcome report, is astronomical. And so we're looking at replicating the Wayne County model as well down the line. All right, so that is my spiel. I always end these type of talks with the same stories, with the same story, because I think it. Somebody asked me, some of the people that 12 years ago I was a fellow of the California Wellness Foundation is here, still coming to the meetings. And so Danny and Andrew, who were with me in that fellowship, and others, asked me, have I been able to do the things I was doing at the mentoring center in the system? And it's an awesome question because in a sense, yes, but in DC, I could say no. We spent so much time just on the systems and just getting people to stop beating youth up and just some of the most simple stuff of trying to change the system. We didn't get to what I think is most important is this mentality shift, is this transformative mentoring, building a relationship. We were able to start it in New York, and in fact, both the Mentoring Center and Nane from Barrios Unidos, who is here, we're trying to get them to come into our facilities to do that kind of deep, spiritual, relationship-based transformation, that mentality shift around, because somebody said to me before, if all you do is get somebody who used to rob people a job, they may stop robbing people, but they may be stealing from the cash register at the job. But if you change the mentality that gives rise to destructive behavior, that they don't see themselves that way, but they see themselves as their true selves, as incredible beings, what I call beings of innate greatness and unlimited potential, if you can do that, then you almost don't even have to give them a job because they won't ever revert back to the foolishness that they were caught up in. And so I always close with this story of the chicken and the eagle. And it's an old African proverbial story that I believe talks about the work that we have to do. And the story of the chicken and the eagle is of an eagle's nest perched high on a mountain. And one day there was an earthquake, and one of the eagle eggs rolled way off the mountain and down into the ground where there was a chicken coop. And the eagle pecked its way to life and came into life in a chicken coop. It was raised by the chickens to be a chicken and therefore believed it was a chicken. And so the little eagle lived every day growing up acting like a chicken because he thought he was a chicken. And one day an elder eagle was flying the skies and looked down and saw the little eagle acting like a chicken. And the elder eagle flew down and started to talk to the little eagle about, why are you acting like a chicken? And he said, what the hell's wrong with you? I am a chicken. And I don't think the official story goes that way, but and the elder eagle didn't give up, but continued to talk to the little eagle about, you're not a chicken, you can fly, you're the greatest of all birds. And the little eagle began to listen and tried to fly, but he couldn't because he had never tried before. And he kind of put the older eagle off, but the elder eagle kept coming back day after day. And then one day, the little eagle tried to fly one more time, and his wings expanded, and he flew through the air, and he was a chicken no more. And that story, old African proverbial story, is true of what we have to do as the system, and what we have to do to help our young people fly off so they can be chickens no more. Thank you very much.